Have you ever been to the grocery store and noticed the absence of something you want to buy, such as cream cheese? Such absences are caused by a complex system of goods. Now, every company uses this system whether they show it or not. Some of them are small and some of them are large. The system I'm talking to you about is called the bum 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 supply chain. And the supply chain is the series of events it takes to get a product to you, the consumer. If you don't believe the supply chain exists, just look around your room. Anything you see might be attributed to the supply chain, and anything you buy affects the supply chain, effectively making you a part of the supply chain. But how? I spent countless hours working at my grocery store and in front of my computer to figure out what the supply chain is and how it works. And now that I have that knowledge, I'm here to show you how a supply chain works, why a company might change it, and why you might not be able to find something at the store when you need it. Let's start with the basics. This is a supply chain. It starts with something like raw materials, say lumber. The lumber is sold to a supplier or manufacturer, let's say a chair making store. The chair making store makes chairs and hires a truck service to distribute them. The truck service distributes them to a retailer. Let's say the retailer is Chairs R Us. Chairs R Us will then sell the chairs to you, the consumer. And because you have bought the chair, you have supplied demand. And demand is needed to keep the cycle going forever. And that's the basics of a supply chain. It goes raw material to a manufacturer, to a distributor, to a retailer, to you, and then you give back demand. Now, some companies skip a couple steps on the way, and now that we have basic knowledge of a supply chain, we can explore why that is. So, different companies sell different things to different people, and so need a different supply chain to suit those needs. Most of the time, they just skip parts of the supply chain, and it's not just for money. Let's prove this by looking at a farmer selling fruits to you in a farmer's market. So, you walk up to the farmer and you buy his fruits, and that's the entire supply chain. And even though he skipped a couple steps in the supply chain, it's still a valid supply chain because he got his raw materials to you, the consumer. So we can conclude that a supply chain is valid if the product gets to the consumer. Now, what if the farmer wanted to sell his product in a real market and wanted to make sure it was sold fresh? He might send his son to go stock his shelves with his fruit and make sure they're sold fresh at the grocery store. Now, according to HCL Technologies, this is called merchandising, and many companies do it to skip a step in the supply chain process. I also have a friend who works as a merchandiser at the grocery store, and he's told me a fair bit about it. So, let's say Coca-Cola is the merchandiser. They'll hire someone to set up shop in a grocery store, and when a supply of soda comes in, the merchandiser is in charge of putting the soda on the shelves and making sure it gets sold. This way, Coca-Cola can ensure that they always have something on the shelves to sell, and the grocery store doesn't have to pay the worker for their work. Think of it as America donating troops to fight in another country. Even though they're fighting for another country, they still represent America and are getting paid by America. The big takeaway here is that a supply chain is complete as long as the product makes it to the consumer. Now, let me skip a couple. There are a lot of risks when dealing with the supply chain. Anything can go wrong. Trucks can crash, managers can be lazy, roads can be icy. And so let's go back to our infamous chair store, Chairs R Us. What if their order of chairs suddenly crashed and burned on an icy road? Like that. That would be a failure in the supply chain, and it's up to Chairs R Us to prevent that from happening. And so to prevent that, they'll hire someone called a supply chain manager who oversees the steps of the supply chain and makes sure everything goes smoothly. And maybe the supply chain manager for Chairs R Us noticed the icy road and told the driver to drive on another day. And then the chairs would get to the Chairs R Us just fine. And that's why supply chain managers are pivotal to a company's success. But the world of supply chains is vast and confusing. Most of us will never be a supply chain manager. Most of us only have to worry about whether or not a package will make it to our front steps on time. But most of us can use this basic knowledge of the supply chain in every day when we go shopping. Now, when we can't find something at the store, like chairs or cream cheese, we can know that something happened in the supply chain, and it's likely stuck on an icy highway. Thank you.